The crimson suns beat down mercilessly on the crystalline dunes of Kalani as Naira adjusted her moisture recycler. The device hummed weakly, struggling to extract what little water remained in the air. Her violet eyes scanned the horizon, searching for any sign of the legendary water source that had brought her to this desolate region. As a water scout for her dying colony, Naira had ventured further into the scarlet wastes than any of her people had dared. Her silver-scaled skin, evolved to conserve moisture, still felt brittle under the harsh light. The colony's reserves would last another month at most. After that, a glint in the distance caught her attention. Not the usual shimmer of heat waves, but something solid. Something artificial. Naira checked her distance reader, whatever it was lay just beyond the next dune ridge. Her rational mind screamed caution, but desperation drove her forward. Cresting the ridge, she froze. A figure stood beside what appeared to be a small moisture harvester, but unlike any design she'd ever seen. The stranger turned, and Naira's breath caught. He was clearly human, tall and bronze-skinned, with intricate turquoise markings spiraling up his arms. Not tattoos, they seemed to pulse with their own inner light. "You're a long way from the settlement zones," he called out, his voice carrying easily across the sand. Despite his relaxed posture, Naira noticed how his hand rested near what looked like an energy weapon at his hip. "I could say the same," she responded, her translator converting her native clicks and whistles into standard human speech. "This is restricted territory." The stranger smiled, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Restricted by whom? The dunes? The wind?" He gestured to the device beside him. "Or perhaps by those who'd rather keep their secrets buried in the sand?" "I am Darius," he continued, "and you look like someone in need of water." He held up a crystalline flask that caught the sunlight, liquid sloshing invitingly inside. Naira's throat constricted at the sight, but years of survival training kept her rooted in place. "Nothing's free in the wastes. What's your price?" "Information," Darius replied, his expression growing serious. "Tell me why a Kalani water scout is searching these particular dunes, and the water is yours." Naira weighed her options. Her moisture recycler gave a worrying sputter, making the decision for her. "I'm tracking energy signatures. Ancient ones. They match patterns found in our oldest texts, suggesting a hidden water source." Darius's markings pulsed brighter. "Interesting. And if I told you I know exactly where those signatures lead? I'd say you're either lying or..." Naira's eyes narrowed. "Or you're something far more dangerous than a simple wanderer." "Smart girl." He tossed her the flask. "Drink. Then we'll talk about the ruins your people's texts only hint at, and the real reason the Nova Rain Corporation has been systematically destroying every trace of ancient water technology they find." Naira caught the flask, her fingers brushing against its cool surface. "Why help me?" "Because," Darius's markings shifted to a deeper blue, "sometimes the universe has a way of bringing the right people together at the right moment. And this moment?" He looked toward the horizon where storm clouds gathered impossibly in the bone-dry air. "This moment has been centuries in the making." The first drops of rain in 1,000 years began to fall, and Naira realized she had stumbled onto something far bigger than her mission to save her colony. In Darius's eyes, she saw reflected both hope and warning, and the certainty that her world would never be the same. The storm passed as quickly as it had appeared, leaving behind something Naira had never seen before, wet sand. She watched Darius collect samples in small crystal vials, his turquoise markings pulsing with each drop. "Your markings," she ventured, following him across the dampened dunes. "They respond to water." "They respond to ancient technology," he corrected, securing the vials in his pack. "The rain wasn't natural. Someone activated a weather control system that hasn't been used in centuries." Naira processed this information, her scout training clicking into place. "The Nova Rain Corporation. You mentioned they're destroying water technology. They're trying to maintain their monopoly." Darius's expression darkened. Control the water, control the worlds. But they don't understand what they're dealing with. He stopped suddenly, holding up a hand. Down. Naira dropped instinctively as an energy bolt sizzled through the air where she'd been standing. Raiders. 3 sleek hovercrafts emerged from behind a dune, their engines howling across the desert silence. Friends of yours? She asked, drawing her sonic pistol. Nova Rain mercenaries, Darius replied, his markings shifting to a dangerous crimson. They've been tracking me since I discovered the first ruin. His hand swept up, and to Naira's amazement, the residual moisture in the sand rose with it, forming a crystalline barrier between them and their attackers. You're a water shaper, she breathed. The ability was legendary among her people, said to have been lost centuries ago. Later, he promised as another energy bolt struck his barrier. Right now, we need to reach the ruins. They're closer than you think. He pressed something into her hand, a small device covered in symbols matching his markings. Trust your instincts. The water will show you the way. The device hummed to life in her grip, and suddenly Naira could feel it, currents of energy flowing beneath the sand like underground rivers. Her silver scales tingled with awareness she'd never experienced before. They ran, ducking between dunes as the raiders gave chase. Darius used his abilities to create false trails, bending light through water crystals to confuse their pursuers. Naira found herself moving with increasing confidence, the device guiding her towards something that called to her very essence. There. She pointed to a sharp cliff face rising from the desert floor. To anyone else, it would appear solid, but through the device, she could see the energy streams converging behind it. Darius grinned. The entrance to the third temple. One of 7 built by the original water shapers. His markings pulsed rapidly. Naira, what you're about to see, it changes everything we thought we knew about our people's histories. They reached the cliff just as the raiders opened fire again. Darius pressed his hand to the rock, his markings blazing, and a doorway materialized. They dove through as the entrance sealed behind them, leaving them in darkness broken only by the bioluminescent glow of Darius's markings. Welcome, he said softly, activating something that caused ancient lights to flicker to life, to the truth about why your people evolved silver scales, and mine were given these markings. Naira stared in wonder at the vast chamber. Every surface was covered in flowing script that seemed to move like water. At the center stood a pool of liquid that glowed with its own inner light, not water, but something far more ancient and powerful. The Nova Rain Corporation would destroy this, she asked, understanding now why Darius had been so cautious. They'd try. He approached the pool, his markings resonating with its light. But they don't realize that these temples. They're not just repositories of water technology. He turned to her, his eyes reflecting the pool's glow. They're weapons. Created by our ancestors to fight something they knew would return. Something that makes the Nova Rain look like children playing in a puddle. A deep rumble shook the chamber. On the walls, the flowing script began to shift, forming images that made Naira's blood run cold, vast creatures rising from the desert depths, consuming all water, all life. And behind them, something darker still. What you saw in the desert, Darius said grimly, the rain, the water shaping, it's just the beginning. The real storm is coming. The question is. He held out his hand to her, markings pulsing in sync with her racing heart. Are you ready to learn what your people were truly created to become? Naira looked at his offered hand, then at the ancient pool of power, understanding that her mission to save her colony had led her to something far more momentous. The fate of not just her world, but all worlds hung in the balance. She took his hand. The ancient pool's light pulsed through Naira's scales, awakening something that had lain dormant in her genetic code for centuries. Silver patterns, similar to Darius's markings but with their own unique crystalline structure, began to shimmer across her skin. The transformation, Darius breathed, watching as the pattern spread. The text said it would happen, but seeing it. His own markings resonated in response to hers, creating harmonics that made the chamber's script glow brighter. "What's happening to me?" Naira asked, but even as the words left her mouth, knowledge began flooding her consciousness. Images, memories, and understanding that had been encoded into her very DNA unfurled like desert flowers after rain. "Your people weren't just evolved to survive the desert," Darius explained, guiding her closer to the pool. "They were engineered to become its guardians. Just as mine were created to be the keepers of the ancient knowledge." The chamber rumbled again, but this time Naira understood it wasn't a threat, the temple was responding to their combined presence. Walls shifted, revealing hidden chambers filled with technology that defied her comprehension. "The Nova Rain thinks this is about water," she said, newfound knowledge flowing through her. "But it's not, is it? The water was just a tool, a means to an end." "The first line of defense," Darius confirmed. "Against them." He waved his hand, and the pool's surface rippled, projecting images into the air. Massive creatures, like nothing Naira had ever seen, emerged from tears in space itself. The Void Thirsters. They don't just consume water, they devour the very essence of life itself. "Our ancestors fought them," Naira said, the memories becoming clearer. "But they couldn't destroy them completely. So they created us, your people, to preserve the knowledge, mine to maintain the barriers. And the temples," Darius added, "to serve as both fortress and weapon when they return." His expression grew troubled. "Which, thanks to Nova Rain's meddling with the ancient systems, will be sooner than anyone expected." A new sound echoed through the chamber, drilling. The raiders hadn't given up. "They're trying to breach the temple's outer walls," Naira observed, but found herself strangely unafraid. Her new abilities thrummed beneath her skin, eager to be tested. "Let them come," Darius said, a fierce smile playing across his lips. "It's time they learned what they're really dealing with." He held out his hand, and water from the pool spiraled up his arm, hardening into crystalline armor. "Ready for your first lesson in being a guardian?" Naira reached out to the pool herself, gasping as the liquid responded instantly to her will. It encased her in similar armor, but where Darius's was angular and precise, hers flowed like quicksilver. "Born ready." The drilling grew louder, but before either of them could move, a new alarm sounded, one that made Darius's markings flash with genuine fear. "No," he whispered. "It's too soon." The temple's script began pulsing in a frantic pattern that Naira could now read. "Multiple spatial anomalies detected," she translated. "The Void Thirsters." "Just scouts," Darius said grimly, "but enough to prove what I've feared. The Nova Rain's attacks on the temples didn't just damage our defenses, they've actually accelerated the invasion timeline." He turned to her, his expression intense. "Everything we thought we had years to prepare for. It's happening now." The chamber shuddered as something massive passed overhead, its shadow visible even through miles of rock. On the walls, damage reports from other temples began streaming in. The raiders' drilling suddenly seemed like the least of their problems. "So what's the plan?" Naira asked, feeling the weight of centuries of preparation settling onto her shoulders. Darius's markings pulsed with determination. "We activate the temple's core systems, gather whatever allies we can trust, and pray we can re-establish the barriers before the main invasion force arrives." He paused, studying her. "It's not too late to walk away. Return to your colony, try to save them." Naira flexed her new armor, watching the patterns of light flow across its surface. "My colony's survival means nothing if these things consume our entire world." She met his gaze steadily. "Besides, I have a feeling this is exactly where I'm meant to be." A massive explosion rocked the temple, the raiders had breached the outer wall. Simultaneously, 3 more spatial anomalies appeared on the temple's detection grid. They were out of time. "Well then, partner," Darius said, his armor crystallizing into deadly-looking spikes, "let's show both our uninvited guests why our ancestors were feared across the galaxy." The temple's inner sanctum erupted into chaos as Nova Rain raiders poured through the breach, only to freeze at the sight before them. Naira and Darius stood transformed, their crystalline armor gleaming with ancient power, while overhead, the temple's detection grid tracked the approaching void thirsters. Last chance, Darius called out to the raiders. Leave now, or face something far worse than us. His markings pulsed with warning light, reflecting off the dozens of weapon barrels aimed at them. The raid leader, a scarred woman with cybernetic enhancements, stepped forward. Stand down and surrender the temple's technology. Nova Rain owns all water rights in this sector. Naira almost laughed at the absurdity. You have no idea what you're interrupting, do you? Through her enhanced senses, she could feel the spatial anomalies growing stronger. There won't be any water rights to claim if we don't. The ceiling exploded inward. A massive tentacle, dark as the void and somehow wrong in ways that hurt to look at, reached into the chamber. Where it touched the ancient stone, all moisture instantly crystallized and shattered. The raiders opened fire, their energy weapons passing harmlessly through the appendage. Naira felt their terror as they finally understood what they'd walked into. The raid leader raised her arm, presumably to call for backup, but never got the chance. The tentacle struck with impossible speed. Darius reacted instantly, throwing up a barrier of crystallized water that saved most of the raiders. Those caught on the wrong side simply ceased to exist, their moisture and life force absorbed in an instant. Get to the control nexus. Darius shouted to Naira as he maintained the barrier. You know what to do. She did, the knowledge burning in her transformed DNA. The temple's core had to be activated, but the process was complex, requiring both a guardian and a keeper working in perfect sync. I'm not leaving you to face this alone. You're not. His eyes met hers, and through their connected power, she felt his certainty. We were literally made for this moment. Trust yourself. Trust us. More tentacles breached the ceiling as Nova Rain survivors scrambled behind Darius's barrier. The raid leader, face pale but composed, stepped up beside him. What do you need? Cover fire, he replied, not taking his eyes off the writhing mass above. Buy us time to power up the temple's defenses. To Naira's surprise, he added, try to avoid the central mass. These are just feeding tentacles, harm the main body, and it'll call others. The leader nodded sharply, already barking orders to her remaining squad. They might work for Nova Rain, but they were survivors first. The enemy of their enemy. Naira raced through ancient corridors, her new abilities guiding her. The control nexus hummed to life at her approach, scripts and symbols flowing across its surfaces. She placed her hands on the central pillar, feeling the temple's full systems awakening to her touch. Through her connection to Darius, she sensed him falling back steadily, his barrier holding but weakening as the void thirster pressed its attack. The raiders provided covering fire, their weapons reconfigured to his specifications to at least slow the creature. Ready, she called through their link. The temple's power surged through her, almost overwhelming in its intensity. Now. Darius dropped his barrier and threw himself into a roll as the raiders scattered. The tentacles plunged forward, but too late. Naira activated the temple's core. Energy exploded outward in a wave of purifying light. The void thirster recoiled, its feeding appendages dissolving as they touched the ancient power. Through the hole in the ceiling, she glimpsed its main body, a darkness that seemed to swallow the desert's twin suns, retreating with an otherworldly shriek. But their victory was short-lived. The temple's sensors registered multiple new anomalies opening across the planet. Worse, the power surge had destabilized the already damaged structure. Support pillars groaned ominously. We need to evacuate, Darius announced, helping the raid leader to her feet. This temple's sacrificing itself to seal the breach. There are 6 others, Naira added, rejoining them. We need to reach them before. A new alarm blared. On the detection grid, hundreds of spatial tiers began appearing. The scout had called for reinforcements. "We need to split up," Darius said, his expression grim. "Each temple needs both a keeper and a guardian to activate its full power." "The nearest temple is 3 days' journey," Naira protested. "We'll never make it in time." The raid leader stepped forward. "We have ships. Fast ones." At their suspicious looks, she shrugged. "You just saved my people from something that makes Nova Rain look like a child's game. I think we can renegotiate our relationship." The temple shuddered again. Through their connection, Naira felt Darius's conflict, and his resolution. They had no choice. Humanity's weapons and ships combined with the ancient powers might give them a fighting chance. "If we fail," he warned the raid leader, "there won't be a planet left for Nova Rain to control." "Then we better not fail." She tapped her comm unit. "All units, prepare for immediate evac. Priority 1 transport to the following coordinates." As the raiders rushed to execute their new orders, Darius caught Naira's hand. Their armor resonated at the contact, sending sparks of power dancing between them. "The next temple," he said softly. "It's where we'll learn if we can truly sync our powers enough to matter." "We will," Naira replied with a certainty she didn't quite feel. "We have to." Above them, the void waited, hungry and infinite. The real war was about to begin. The second temple rose before them like a spear of hope piercing the darkened sky. In the 3 days since their escape, the void thirsters had transformed the desert. Where endless dunes once stretched, now crystallized wasteland sparkled lifelessly under the dying suns. Naira stood at the helm of the Nova Rain transport ship, her enhanced senses detecting the ripples of void energy distorting space around them. Behind her, the raid leader, who had introduced herself as Commander Thena, coordinated with other surviving military units across the planet. "The southern continent is gone," Thena reported grimly. "Completely drained. Northern defense lines are holding, barely, but they're just playing with us," Darius finished, his markings pulsing with barely contained energy. "The main force hasn't even arrived yet." Through their strengthening bond, Naira felt his frustration. They'd spent the journey learning to combine their abilities, but every success felt small against the scale of what they faced. The void thirsters were consuming their world faster than anyone had predicted. The ship landed at the temple's base, and Naira's breath caught. Unlike the first temple's weathered exterior, this one gleamed with pristine power. It had been waiting for them, protected by defenses that had kept even Nova Rain from detecting it. "Remember," Darius addressed the assembled raiders turned allies, "if we fail to activate the temple's core, your only priority is getting word to the other sites. The sequence must be completed, even if," he stopped as Naira gripped his arm. "We're not going to fail," she said firmly, her silver patterns glowing in response to his turquoise markings. "Our ancestors built these temples as a network. Each activation makes the others stronger." They entered the temple together, Thena's forces establishing a perimeter outside. The interior took Naira's breath away, not with size or grandeur, but with purpose. Every surface, every pattern was designed for what they needed to do. "The synchronization chamber," Darius breathed, leading them to the heart of the temple. "This is where we'll truly learn what it means to be keeper and guardian." The chamber was smaller than Naira expected, dominated by 2 crystalline pillars rising from a pool of the same luminescent liquid they'd encountered before. As they approached, their armor resonated with the ancient power. "Once we begin," Darius warned, "there's no stopping. Our consciousness, our powers, everything will merge. Are you ready for that?" Naira met his gaze. Through their bond, she felt his concern, his care for her warring with the necessity of their mission. "I've been ready since you first offered me water in the desert." A massive impact rocked the temple before he could respond. Above, void energies twisted the sky into impossible patterns. The main invasion had begun. They took their positions at the pillars. The moment Naira's hands touched the crystal, her consciousness expanded. She felt Darius's presence intertwining with hers, their separate abilities merging into something greater than either had imagined possible. Through his memories, she saw the centuries of preparation, generations of keepers maintaining the knowledge. Through hers, he felt the guardian's instinct, the deep connection to the desert's life force that the void thirsters sought to consume. Together, they began the activation sequence. Power surged through the temple, but this time it felt right, controlled. Their merged consciousness reached out, connecting with the other temples across the planet. Each site hummed with potential, waiting for its own keeper and guardian pair. Through their shared vision, they saw the truth of what the temples really were, not just weapons or fortresses, but keys. Keys to unlocking the planet's true purpose. It's not just about defending, Naira/Darius realized as one. The temples aren't walls, they're roots. Their combined power reached deep into the planet's core, awakening something that had slumbered since their ancestors' time. The desert itself began to rise, ancient molecules reconstructing themselves into their original form. The void thirsters sensed the change. Their feeding frenzy became desperate as the very ground beneath them transformed. Where they had drained life, new energy flowed. Where they had crystallized water, living streams emerged. The temple's power peaked, and with it, their merged consciousness glimpsed the final truth. Their world had never been just a planet, it was a seed, planted by their ancestors, waiting for the right guardians and keepers to help it bloom. Reality twisted as the planet's transformation accelerated. The void thirsters screamed in frequencies that shattered their crystallized wasteland. But where before such destruction would have been permanent, now new growth emerged instantly from the ruins. They can't consume what continuously rebuilds itself, Naira realized as their consciousness began to separate. A perpetual engine of life, Darius agreed, his physical form solidifying beside her. That's what our ancestors created. Not just a weapon against the void, but a source of endless renewal. The temple shuddered one final time as the transformation completed. Outside, Thena's forces watched in awe as their dying desert world transformed into a living paradise. The void thirsters, unable to maintain their hold on reality without the death they fed upon, were pulled back into their dimension. Naira and Darius emerged from the temple, their armor now permanently bonded to their forms, their powers forever intertwined. The desert stretched before them, not as the wasteland it had been, but as the living world it was meant to be. What now? Thena asked, holstering her weapon as the last void anomalies closed. Darius looked at Naira, their bond humming with shared purpose. Now we find the other keepers and guardians. There are more worlds that need awakening. More seeds to bloom, Naira agreed, taking his hand. Their patterns glowed together, turquoise and silver light merging like the twin suns overhead. The desert wind carried the scent of water and life, promising not an ending, but a new beginning. For in the heart of every desert lies a garden, waiting for the right hands to help it grow.